My name is Rachel Montgomery. I'm 34 years old, a cardiology resident, and a single mother of 3-year-old twins. 2 months ago, I was lying in an ambulance, bleeding internally, watching my life slip away minute by minute. My hands were shaking as I dialed my parents' number. I needed someone, anyone, to watch Emma and Oliver while doctors tried to save my life. What I got instead was a text message in our family group chat. Rachel, you've always been the difficult one. We have Taylor Swift tickets with Victoria tonight. Figure it out like you always do. My sister's response? A laughing emoji. So I did figure it out. From that ambulance, with an IV in my arm and fear in my heart, I called a stranger to watch my children. I paid triple the rate, and I made a decision that would change everything. I cut them off completely. The monthly mortgage payments, the health insurance, the car repairs. Everything I'd been quietly paying for the past 8 years, gone. 2 weeks later, there was a knock on my door. Before I tell you who was standing there and what happened next, let me take you back to the beginning, to the moment everything shattered, and the moment I finally started to see clearly. The rain came down in sheets that Tuesday evening, turning the Baltimore streets into rivers of reflected light. I remember thinking the wipers couldn't keep up, that I should pull over and wait it out. But I'd already been at Johns Hopkins for 18 hours, and my children were waiting. Emma and Oliver, 3 years old, the only people in the world who loved me without conditions. My eyes were heavy but not closed. I was alert. I'd checked myself the way doctors learn to do after years of running on coffee and adrenaline. I was functional. I was fine. The dashboard clock read 7:03 p.m. Maya, my babysitter, would leave at 8. 57 minutes to get home, relieve her, and collapse into bed with my twins on either side of me, their small bodies warm against mine. My phone pinged. I didn't look. I never looked while driving, but I knew it was Maya, probably texting that the kids were asking when Mommy was coming home. They always asked. It was the best part of my day, that question. Someone wanted me there. The light turned green. I pulled into the intersection. I never saw the truck. It came from the left, a delivery vehicle from Patterson Furniture, the logo bright against the white panels, running the red at 50 miles per hour. Later, I would learn the driver had been on a double shift, that he'd nodded off for just a second, that he'd wake up in a hospital bed with a broken collarbone and the weight of what he'd done pressing on his chest. But in that moment, there was only the impact. Glass exploded inward. Not the dramatic shattering of movies. Safety glass doesn't work that way. Instead, it became 1,000 tiny diamonds catching the streetlight, beautiful in the half-second before they bit into my skin. Metal screamed, the world spun, my body slammed against the door, then the airbag, then something else I couldn't identify. Then, everything went black. I woke in the ambulance to pain so bright it had a color, white, searing, spreading from my abdomen like fire. Rachel, can you hear me? A face hovered above me, familiar, angular jaw, kind eyes, the particular exhaustion that came from years of emergency medicine. David Keller. We'd worked together for 2 years, passed each other in hallways, shared terrible coffee in the break room. He'd lost his wife 18 months ago. Cancer, the slow kind that steals someone piece by piece. And I'd brought him meals during those final weeks. Left them outside his door without knocking because I knew he couldn't bear to be seen. David. My voice came out wrong, weak, wet. What's happening? You were in an accident. Serious one. His hands moved over me, professional and quick. We're taking you to Hopkins now. Possible internal bleeding. You're going to need surgery. Surgery? The word hit me like a second collision. My kids. I grabbed his arm, and even that small movement sent lightning through my torso. Emma and Oliver. They're with the babysitter. She leaves at 8. David checked his watch. His expression flickered, just for a second, before the professional mask returned. It's 7:18. You've got time. 42 minutes. I had 42 minutes to find someone to watch my children while doctors cut me open and tried to keep me alive. I fumbled for my phone. It had fallen somewhere during the crash, but someone had retrieved it, probably the paramedics, and placed it near my hand. The screen was cracked, a spider web of fractures across the glass, but it still worked. Blood smeared across it as I pulled up my parents' number. Please, I thought, just this once. Please. The phone rang 4 times. I counted each one like a heartbeat. Rachel. My father's voice was impatient, distracted. In the background, I heard music, laughter, the clink of glasses. We're about to leave. What is it? Dad, I need help. The words tumbled out between gasps of pain. I was in an accident. I'm being taken to the hospital. Surgery. Please, I need you and Mom to watch the twins, just for a few hours. Silence on the line. Then, hold on. I heard muffled voices. My mother's tone, sharp with annoyance. Victoria's laugh. That particular laugh she had. The one that always made me feel like I was the punchline of a joke I hadn't heard. The line went quiet. For a moment, I thought the call had dropped. Then my phone buzzed with a text notification. Family group chat. The message was from my mother. Rachel, you've always been the difficult one. We have Taylor Swift tickets with Victoria tonight. We've been planning this for months. Your father isn't feeling well and I can't deal with your drama right now. Figure it out like you always do. I read it twice. 3 times. The words didn't change. A second message appeared from my father. Your mother's right. You're resourceful. Don't make this into a bigger deal than it needs to be. Then Victoria. Not words. Just an emoji. I stared at that tiny yellow face, laughing at me while I bled in an ambulance, and something inside me cracked open. Not my spleen, though that was rupturing too. Something deeper. Something I'd been holding together for 34 years with nothing but hope and denial. David was watching me. I didn't realize he could see my screen until he spoke. Rachel. His voice was careful, the voice doctors use when they're about to deliver bad news. What did they say? I couldn't answer. The pain in my abdomen was nothing compared to this other pain, this cavity opening in my chest where something vital used to be. I need a phone, I whispered. One with internet. Mine's dying. He handed me his without question. I found the service in 30 seconds. Emerald City Childcare, 24-hour emergency nanny placement, premium rates. The kind of service that existed for exactly this situation, for parents with money and without support. I had money. I'd always had money, not because I'd grown up with it, but because I'd worked for it. 4 years of undergrad, 4 years of medical school, 3 years of residency, 100-hour weeks and student loans and the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that becomes your baseline. I had money because I'd earned every cent of it. What I didn't have was family. Not really. Not the kind that showed up. The call was efficient, clinical. My voice didn't shake. This is Dr. Rachel Montgomery. I'm being transported to Johns Hopkins for emergency surgery. I have 3-year-old twins at home with a sitter who leaves at 8 p.m. I need immediate coverage for approximately 12 to 18 hours. The woman on the other end was professional, unfazed. She'd heard this before, probably heard worse. I can have someone there within 30 minutes. Our emergency rate is triple standard. Fine. I'll need credit card information and authorization to... Whatever you need, just get someone there. She assigned a nanny named Margaret O'Brien. Irish, she said, former pediatric nurse. Excellent references. I gave her Maya's number for the handoff, my building code, the children's names and ages and allergies and bedtime routine. All of it in 4 minutes, while my blood pressure dropped and David's expression grew more concerned. Mrs. O'Brien will send you updates, the woman said. Photos, videos, whatever you need. Your children will be safe, with a stranger. Because my own family couldn't be bothered. Thank you, I said, and ended the call. I handed the phone back to David. He was still watching me with that careful expression. Those people in the texts, he said, the ones who couldn't help. My family. He didn't respond, didn't offer platitudes or sympathy or any of the things people usually said. He just nodded, slowly, like something had been confirmed. Rachel, I know this isn't the time, but when you wake up, if you want to talk about what family actually means. The ambulance lurched. Someone shouted that we were 2 minutes out. David's attention snapped back to my vitals, my blood pressure, the various ways my body was trying to fail. "We'll talk later," I managed. "We will." Then we arrived, and there was no more time for talking. The operating room was cold and bright, and I remember thinking that I'd been on the other side of rooms like this 100 times, watching surgeons work, assisting on procedures, learning how to hold someone's life in my hands. I'd never considered what it felt like to be the one on the table. It felt like surrender. "Count backward from 10, someone said. I made it to 7. I dreamed about my children. In the dream, they were older, maybe 6 or 7, and we were walking through a park I didn't recognize. Emma was holding my hand, chattering about something that made perfect sense in the dream, but dissolved the moment I tried to focus on it. Oliver was running ahead, then circling back the way he always did, too excited about the world to stay in one place. "Mommy," Emma said, looking up at me with her serious brown eyes. My eyes, everyone said, identical down to the flecks of gold near the iris. "Are we going to Grandma's house?" And in the dream, I said, "No, baby. We have our own house now." She smiled. Oliver laughed. The sun was warm on my face. Then I woke up. Recovery happened in fragments. The first day was morphine and monitors and a parade of nurses checking my vitals every hour. My spleen was gone, ruptured beyond saving, and I'd lost enough blood to need 2 transfusions. The surgeon, Dr. Pamela Wright, told me I'd been 15 minutes from death when they got me on the table. "Another quarter hour," she said, "and we'd be having a very different conversation. Or not having one at all." I nodded, thanked her, didn't mention that part of me had expected to die, had been preparing for it even, in some small corner of my mind. Single mothers with no support learned to think about these things. What would happen to the children? Whether anyone would notice I was gone. The emergency nanny service sent updates every few hours. Photos of Emma and Oliver eating breakfast, building towers with blocks, being tucked into bed. The nanny, Margaret O'Brien, Maggie, she said to call her, had a warm Irish-accented voice in the video messages she sent. "Your little ones are doing grand," she said in one of them, Oliver asleep on her shoulder. "This one's got your stubbornness. Wouldn't go down without 3 stories and a song. But we managed. You just focus on getting better, Dr. Montgomery. We'll hold down the fort." I watched that video 6 times. A stranger, showing more care for my children in 12 hours than my parents had shown in 3 years. My phone was silent. No calls from my family, no texts, not even a follow-up asking if I'd survived the surgery. On the second day, the morphine fog lifted enough for me to think clearly, and the first clear thought I had was this: I've been paying for people who don't even like me. On the third day, I asked the nurse for my laptop. "Are you sure you're up for it?" she asked. Jennifer, her name was. Young, eager, the kind of nurse who would burn out in 5 years if she didn't learn to pace herself. "You should be resting." "I need to take care of something." She brought it anyway. Good nurse, knew when to push and when to let patients have their autonomy. I opened my banking app and stared at 8 years of my life reduced to numbers on a screen. The spreadsheet had started as a practical thing. Tax purposes, I'd told myself. Documentation. But somewhere along the way, it had become something else. A record of everything I'd given, everything I'd sacrificed, laid out in neat columns that couldn't lie. I pulled it up now and really looked at it. Not as individual payments, isolated incidents, manageable contributions to family members who were going through a hard time. As a whole, as a pattern. Mortgage payments, $2,400 per month, times 96 months equals $230,400. It had started innocently enough. My father called me one evening 8 years ago, right after I finished medical school. His voice was tight with embarrassment. "Rachel, we're in a bit of a bind. The mortgage payment is due and things are tight this month. Could you help us out? Just this once." Just this once. Those 3 words had become the foundation of everything that followed. Health insurance premiums, $800 per month, times 96 months equals $76,800. When Dad's company dropped their coverage 3 years into my residency, I picked up the bill. They were my parents. Of course I would help. That's what family did. Emergency expenses. Father's car transmission, $3,200. Roof repair, $12,000. Mother's dental implants, $8,500. HVAC replacement, $7,800. Victoria's business loan, never repaid, $15,000. Total, $46,500. Every time there was a reason. Every time it was urgent. Every time I transferred the money without hesitation, without complaint, without asking when, if ever, I might see any of it returned. Miscellaneous gifts, $12,000 over 8 years. Birthday presents, holiday contributions, last-minute requests that always seemed to come right when I'd managed to build up a small cushion in my savings. I added it up, then I added it again, certain I'd made a mistake. $364,000. I stared at the number, tried to make it make sense, tried to reconcile it with the text message still burned into my memory, with the laughing emoji, with 34 years of being the reliable one, the strong one, the one who didn't need anything because she could handle it herself. I've been paying for permission to exist in their orbit, I thought, and the price keeps going up. The room was quiet. Late afternoon light slanted through the blinds, casting stripes across my hospital bed. My IV dripped steadily. My phone sat silent on the bedside table. I thought about Emma and Oliver, about the life I wanted for them versus the life I'd accepted for myself. I never wanted them to feel like they had to earn love. I never wanted them to learn that family meant giving everything and receiving nothing. I never wanted them to grow up watching their mother disappear piece by piece into the endless pit of someone else's needs. The decision when it came was surprisingly easy. I opened my banking app, navigated to recurring payments, found the automatic transfers that had been running like clockwork for nearly a decade. $2,400 on the 1st of every month, $800 on the 15th. My finger hovered over the cancel button. "They're your parents," a voice whispered. The voice of the girl I used to be, the one who still believed that if she just tried hard enough, gave enough, sacrificed enough, they would finally see her. "They left you to die," another voice answered. Colder, clearer, the voice of the woman I was becoming. I pressed cancel. Then I did it again. And again. Every automatic payment, every scheduled transfer, every financial lifeline I'd been extending to people who couldn't be bothered to answer their phone when I was bleeding. It took less than 3 minutes to dismantle 8 years of one-sided generosity. When it was done, I opened my phone settings, found my father's number, blocked it, then my mother's, then Victoria's. I set down the phone and closed my eyes. For the first time in 8 years, the weight on my chest wasn't just surgical pain. It was something lighter, something that felt almost like freedom. David stopped by that evening, as he had every day since the accident. He brought coffee, terrible hospital coffee, but warm, and sat in the chair by my bed without asking if I wanted company. "How are you feeling?" I looked at him. Really looked. At the lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 2 years ago. At the gray threading through his dark hair. At the kindness in his expression that wasn't pity, wasn't professional detachment, was simply presence. "Better," I said. "For the first time in 8 years, I actually feel better." He didn't push for details, didn't ask what I meant. He just nodded like he understood and sipped his terrible coffee. "The nanny called me," he said after a while. "Margaret. She wanted to check on you. Said she tried your phone, but it kept going to voicemail. I'd turned it off after blocking my family. Couldn't bear to see if they'd notice. Couldn't bear worse if they didn't. She seems nice, the nanny. She sent me videos of the kids. They're doing fine." "Good." He paused. "Rachel, about those texts, the ones from your family. I don't want to talk about it. I know, but I screenshotted them, like I said I would." He met my eyes. "In case you ever need them, for whatever reason." I thought about the spreadsheet, the numbers, the evidence of 8 years of exploitation disguised as family obligation. "Thank you," I said. "I think I might." We sat in comfortable silence after that. Outside, the sun set over Baltimore, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Somewhere in the city, my children were safe with a stranger who cared more about them than my own parents did. Somewhere else, my family was probably enjoying their Taylor Swift concert, not sparing a single thought for the daughter and sister bleeding out on an operating table. The fallout was coming. I knew that. My parents would notice the missing money, eventually. They would call, demand explanations, rage and cry, and guilt me like they always had. But for now, in this quiet hospital room, with David's steady presence beside me and my children's faces smiling from my phone screen, I let myself rest. Tomorrow, I would figure out what came next. Tonight, I would simply breathe. 2 weeks later, I was finally home. The apartment felt different, smaller somehow. Or maybe I was different, more aware of the walls I'd built around myself, the careful life I'd constructed in the spaces my family refused to fill. Emma and Oliver had adapted to my absence with the resilience of young children. They'd missed me, Maya said, but Maggie had been wonderful, had made the transition feel like an adventure rather than a crisis. When I finally came home, they threw themselves at me with enough force to make my surgical incision ache. "Mommy's back!" Oliver shouted, climbing onto the couch to reach my face. "Mommy, mommy, mommy!" "Gentle with mommy," Maya reminded them. "Remember, she's still healing." But I didn't care about the pain. I held them both, breathing in their smell, apple shampoo and Play-Doh and something indefinably them, and let myself cry for the first time since the accident. Not sad tears, not self-pitying tears, just release. The first week home was slow and careful. I couldn't lift the twins, couldn't chase them around the apartment, couldn't do any of the physical things that usually exhausted me by bedtime. Instead, I sat on the couch and read them stories. Built block towers they could knock down. Watched the same 3 episodes of Bluey until I could recite them from memory. It was boring. It was frustrating. It was exactly what I needed. My phone stayed mostly silent. A few texts from colleagues wishing me well. A card from David. Handwritten, simple. "Take care of yourself. You've earned it." Maya's updates throughout the day. Nothing from my family. Part of me had expected them to notice immediately. To call, demanding to know why the mortgage payment hadn't cleared, why the insurance premium was late. Part of me had braced for the confrontation, rehearsed what I would say, prepared for the guilt and manipulation that would surely follow. But there was only silence. It shouldn't have surprised me. They'd never paid attention to where the money came from, only that it arrived. Checking their accounts, tracking payments, acknowledging my contributions, that would have required them to see me as a person rather than a resource. Still, the silence stung. Even now, after everything, I couldn't quite kill the hope that they would reach out, that the accident would have shocked them into self-awareness, that somewhere, somehow, they actually cared. I was still waiting to be wrong about them. I would wait a long time. The knock came on a Saturday morning. I was in the kitchen, attempting pancakes despite my limited mobility. Emma was helping by adding chocolate chips, far too many, while Oliver stacked his wooden blocks nearby, pausing occasionally to knock them down with gleeful destruction. The apartment smelled like butter and maple syrup. Morning light streamed through the windows. For a moment, everything felt almost normal. Then, 3 sharp raps on the door. I froze, spatula in hand. If it was my parents, I wasn't ready. I hadn't prepared. All my carefully rehearsed speeches evaporated, leaving only the raw wound of their abandonment and the terrifying possibility of having to face them. "Stay here," I told Emma. "Mommy's going to check the door." I walked slowly, partly because I was still healing, partly because I was stalling. The peephole was smudged. I wiped it with my sleeve and pressed my eye to the tiny circle of glass. My breath caught. Standing on my doorstep was a tall man in his late 70s, silver hair, neatly combed, sharp blue eyes that I remembered from childhood, from holidays at his estate before my mother found reasons to keep us away. A posture that still carried the authority of 40 years on the federal bench, despite the slight stoop of age. Judge Thomas Whitfield, my grandfather. I hadn't seen him in almost 3 years. I opened the door and he pulled me into a hug so tight it made my surgical incision throb. I didn't care. Rachel. His voice was rougher than I remembered, worn by time and something else I couldn't identify. Let me look at you. He held me at arm's length, scanning my face with those sharp eyes. Then his gaze dropped to where my hand rested protectively over my abdomen. I know everything, he said quietly. Eleanor told me. Aunt Eleanor, my mother's younger sister, the family's black sheep, the only person who'd ever openly questioned how my parents treated me. Grandpa, I don't... He held up a hand. You don't need to explain anything, but I need you to come somewhere with me. Come where? I can't just... The children... Bring them. What I have to say, I want you to hear. All of you. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. Cream-colored, elegant, formal. The kind of stationery that cost more than my monthly grocery bill. My 78th birthday party, he said. Next Saturday, the whole family will be there. The whole family, including my parents, including Victoria. Grandpa, I'm not sure that's a good idea. Neither am I. His eyes met mine, and I saw something there I hadn't expected. Determination, purpose, and underneath it all, a sadness that seemed to reach back decades. But I have some things that need to be said, things I should have said years ago, and I want you there when I say them. Behind me, Oliver's block tower crashed to the ground. Emma giggled. The smell of slightly burning pancakes drifted from the kitchen. My ordinary life intersecting with something that felt like the end of an era, or maybe the beginning. Let me think about it, I said. Don't think too long. He pressed the envelope into my hands. Some things can't wait forever. He left me standing in the doorway, holding an invitation that felt heavier than paper had any right to be. In the kitchen, my pancakes were starting to smoke. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a clock had started ticking. Thomas Whitfield sat at my kitchen table like he belonged there, his large hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had long gone cold. Emma and Oliver had taken to him immediately, drawn by some instinct children have for recognizing safety, and were now showing him their entire collection of stuffed animals with the seriousness of museum curators. This is Mr. Whiskers, Emma announced, thrusting a bedraggled cat toward him. He's the bravest. I can see that, Thomas said gravely. He has the look of a warrior. Oliver, not to be outdone, presented a stuffed elephant missing one eye. This is Stompy. He fights monsters. An excellent name for a monster fighter. I watched from the kitchen doorway, something tight in my chest slowly loosening. This was what grandfathers were supposed to be. This warmth, this presence, this willingness to take seriously the things children found important. This was what my children had been missing. They look just like you did at that age, Thomas said, glancing up at me. Same stubborn chin, same way of looking at the world like it owes you an explanation. I don't remember you visiting much when I was little. The words came out sharper than I'd intended. Thomas's expression flickered. Pain, regret, something older and more complicated. No, he said quietly. I didn't. That's one of many things I need to explain. I sent the twins to their room with the promise of extra screen time, a bribe I rarely used but desperate times, and sat down across from him. The kitchen felt smaller with him in it, his presence filling the space the way it must have filled courtrooms for 4 decades. Start from the beginning, I said. Tell me why. Thomas was silent for a long moment, staring at his cold coffee like it held answers. When he spoke, his voice was different, rougher, older, carrying the weight of decades. Your grandmother Margaret was the one who held this family together, not me. I was too busy with my career, too convinced that providing financially was the same as being present. She was the one who noticed things, who saw people clearly. I remember her. A little. She died 5 years ago. Stroke. Quick, at least. She was there one moment and gone the next. He swallowed hard. After she passed, I lost my rudder. That's the only excuse I have, and it's not a good one. What do you mean? Margaret never tolerated nonsense from your mother. She saw how Helen treated you differently from Victoria, and she called it out every time. She'd pull Helen aside at family gatherings, have those quiet conversations that left your mother tight-lipped and resentful. I thought she was being too hard on Helen. I thought it would sort itself out. He looked up at me and his eyes were wet. I was wrong. After Margaret died, there was no one to check Helen's behavior, and I was too deep in my own grief to notice what was happening. By the time I came up for air, 3 years had passed. Your mother had built a wall around your family, and I let her. Every time I suggested a visit, she had a reason why it wasn't convenient. You were busy with medical school. The twins were too young to travel. I was too old for the drive. And you believed her? I believed I had time. He laughed bitterly. The arrogance of it. 40 years on the bench, watching families destroy themselves over less. And I thought mine would be different. I thought eventually Helen would grow out of it. That she'd see you clearly someday, the way Margaret always did. But she didn't. No, she became more herself, not less. And now? He stopped, pressing his lips together. Now what? Thomas reached across the table and took my hand. His grip was strong but trembling slightly, age or emotion I couldn't tell. Eleanor called me the night of your accident. She'd heard through your cousin Michael. When she told me what happened, what Helen said, what they all said while you were bleeding in that ambulance. He couldn't finish. For the first time, I saw my grandfather, the federal judge who had sentenced criminals, who had stared down the worst of humanity without flinching, struggle to contain his emotions. I've watched this for years, Rachel. The favoritism, the neglect, the way your parents light up when Victoria walks into a room and barely notice when you do. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere, that Helen and Richard were adults who could raise their children as they saw fit. That was my failure, one of many. Why are you telling me this now? Thomas's grip tightened on my hand. Because I'm dying, he said, and I don't have time to wait for Helen to change, for Richard to develop a conscience, for Victoria to grow up. I have months, maybe a year if I'm lucky. And I refuse to leave this world without setting at least one thing right. The word hit me like a physical blow. Dying. What do you mean, dying? Dying how? Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. He said it calmly, the way you might discuss the weather. Diagnosed 3 months ago. The doctors gave me 6 to 12 months, depending on how I respond to treatment. So far, not well. My medical training kicked in automatically, running through statistics I wished I didn't know. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. 5-year survival rate, less than 10%. Median survival, 3 to 6 months. One of the deadliest diagnoses in oncology. Grandpa? Don't. He held up a hand. Don't give me the doctor look. I've had 3 months to make my peace with this. What I haven't made peace with is leaving things the way they are. What do you want to do? My birthday party, next Saturday. The whole family will be there. Aunts, uncles, cousins. Everyone who's spent the last 30 years believing your mother's version of events. I want them to hear the truth. The truth about what? About everything. About how much you've given to your parents. About what they said when you were dying. About the kind of people they really are behind the perfect family facade. I pulled my hand back, my heart racing. Grandpa, that's scorched earth. If you do that, there's no going back. I know. They'll never forgive you. Mom will never speak to you again. I know that too. His eyes met mine, steady and sad. But I've spent 5 years letting Helen control the narrative, letting her keep you at arm's length from the rest of the family, letting her paint you as the difficult one, the dramatic one, the daughter who couldn't handle things on her own. I'm done letting her lies go unchallenged. Why does it matter if you only have months? Because of them. He gestured toward the room where Emma and Oliver were playing. Your children. My great-grandchildren, who I've barely been allowed to know. They deserve to grow up with family who actually shows up. Real family, not the ones who treat their mother like an ATM. I sat back in my chair, trying to process everything. Thomas dying, a confrontation at the party, the end of whatever fragile relationship still existed with my parents. What exactly are you planning? I want you to bring documentation. Every payment you've made to your parents over the past 8 years. Every transfer, every date, every amount. I'll present it to the family, not as an attack, not as revenge, simply as facts. And then what? And then they can decide for themselves what kind of people Helen and Richard really are. He leaned forward. Your Aunt Eleanor is already gathering information. She's found some things you should know about, things that make the situation even worse than you realized. Worse how? That is for Eleanor to tell you. But Rachel… He paused, choosing his words carefully. I need to know if you're willing to do this. I won't force you. If you want to walk away, pretend none of this happened. Try to rebuild some kind of relationship with your parents. I'll respect that. But if you're ready to stop carrying their weight, to let the truth come out and deal with whatever comes after, I'll be right beside you. I thought about the text message, the laughing emoji, the $364,700 I'd poured into people who couldn't be bothered to answer a phone call when I was dying. I thought about Emma and Oliver and the kind of family I wanted them to have. I'll need time to put the documents together. Thomas's face softened with something like pride. I was hoping you'd say that. 3 days before the party, Eleanor came to my apartment. She arrived with a box of pastries from my favorite bakery, a peace offering or a bribe, I wasn't sure which, and a folder thick with papers that she set on my kitchen table like it might explode. How are you feeling? She asked, studying me with the sharp eyes she shared with Thomas. Really? Physically, almost normal. Emotionally? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Ask me again after Saturday. Eleanor nodded, understanding. She'd always understood, even when the rest of the family didn't. Growing up, she'd been the one who actually noticed me, sent birthday cards with handwritten notes, called to congratulate me on achievements my parents forgot to mention, quietly checked in during the hardest years of medical school. I need to show you something before the party. You have a right to know, and it might change how you approach this. Okay. I sat down across from her, bracing myself. Show me. Eleanor opened the folder. Inside were bank statements highlighted and annotated in her precise handwriting. After Daddy told me about his plan, I did some digging. I still have some connections from my years on the school board, people who know how to find financial records that others might want to keep hidden. She spread the papers across the table. What I found, Rachel, it's worse than you know. I looked at the documents, trying to make sense of the highlighted numbers. What am I looking at? These are your father's bank statements, not the main account, a secondary one he opened 6 years ago. Look at the regular transfers. I followed her pointing finger. Every month, like clockwork, a transfer of varying amounts, sometimes $500, sometimes $1,000, sometimes more, to an account labeled only with initials, V.M. Victoria Montgomery. I don't understand, I said slowly. Victoria has her own income, her fashion business. Her fashion business has been hemorrhaging money for years. She's been living way beyond her means. The apartment in Manhattan, the designer clothes, the lifestyle she posts all over social media. It's all smoke and mirrors. Eleanor pulled out another sheet. Your father has been taking money from the funds you send for the mortgage and insurance, skimming off the top and funneling it to Victoria. Over the past 6 years, he's diverted approximately $45,000 from your contributions directly to your sister's failing business ventures. The number hit me like a second car crash. $45,000? At minimum, there may be more that I couldn't trace. Eleanor's voice was tight with controlled anger. Your mother may not even know, or if she does, she's pretending not to. But your father has been systematically stealing from you to support Victoria's lifestyle. While you were working 100-hour weeks, while you were raising twins alone, while you were bleeding out in an ambulance and they couldn't be bothered to answer the phone. I stared at the documents, the numbers blurring as my eyes filled with tears I refused to let fall. I thought… My voice cracked. I thought I was helping them survive. I thought they were struggling to make ends meet. That's what they always said. That's why I kept sending money even when I couldn't really afford it. They weren't struggling, Rachel. Your father took early retirement at 55 because he knew you'd pick up the slack. Your mother hasn't worked a day in her life because she's never had to. They've been living off your labor for 8 years, and they've been using the surplus to prop up Victoria." Eleanor reached across the table and gripped my hand. "You've been funding your own replacement, the favorite daughter's lifestyle, paid for by the daughter they forgot." I don't know how long I sat there in silence. Long enough for the afternoon light to shift across the table. Long enough for my coffee to go cold. Long enough for the reality of what I was seeing to fully sink in. "Why?" I finally asked. "Why would Dad do this? I would have helped Victoria if she'd asked. I helped her before, that $15,000 business loan that was never repaid. She knew she could come to me. Because then Victoria would have to acknowledge needing help, and your parents would have to acknowledge that you were the one providing it." Eleanor's voice was gentle but firm. "This way, everyone gets to maintain the fiction. Victoria gets to be the successful designer living her best life. Your parents get to be the proud supporters of their golden child, and you get to be invisible, as always." I could have used that money. $45,000, that's almost 2 years of daycare costs. That's Emma and Oliver's college fund. I stopped, overwhelmed by the math of it. "I know." Eleanor squeezed my hand. "And I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't look into this sooner. I'm sorry I didn't push harder when I saw how Helen treated you. I'm sorry the family let this happen for so long." "It's not your fault." "Maybe not entirely, but I was complicit in my own way. We all were." She sat back, her expression hardening. "That changes Saturday. Daddy's going to present the basic facts, the payments, the text message, the pattern of neglect. But this," she tapped the folder, "this is your ammunition, if you choose to use it. If I expose this, Dad will never forgive me." "He doesn't deserve your forgiveness, Rachel. Neither of them do." I looked at the documents again. The evidence of years of betrayal, laid out in black and white and highlighted yellow. Does Victoria know where the money's been coming from? I don't know. She might. She might be willfully ignorant. Does it matter? I thought about my sister, about the way she'd laughed at me my entire life. Not the fond laughter of siblings who tease each other, but the sharp, dismissive laughter of someone who'd been taught that I was less than. About the laughing emoji she'd sent while I bled in an ambulance. "No," I said quietly. "I guess it doesn't." The next day, I returned to work for a half shift, light duty only. No procedures, no long hours, just catching up on paperwork and letting the hospital see that I was still alive. My colleagues were kind, solicitous, full of questions about my recovery that I deflected with practiced ease. It felt strange to be back. The fluorescent lights, the antiseptic smell, the constant low-level hum of life and death decisions being made in every corner. This had been my world for so long. This had been my escape from everything else. I was eating lunch in the cafeteria, alone, as usual, reviewing patient files on my tablet, when someone slid into the seat across from me. "Dr. Montgomery, we should talk." I looked up. The man was in his early 40s, impeccably dressed in a suit that cost more than my car. Dark hair, silvering at the temples. The kind of handsome that came from expensive grooming and genetic luck. I recognized him from photographs. Victoria's Instagram, the society pages, the carefully curated images of a perfect life. James Hartley, Victoria's ex-husband. "Do I know you?" "We've never officially met." "I'm James." He extended his hand. I didn't take it. "I was married to your sister for 6 years. The divorce finalized 8 months ago." "I know who you are. What I don't know is why you're here." James withdrew his hand, unsurprised by my coldness. "Because I heard about your accident, and I heard about what happened afterward. The text message, the family reaction, all of it. Word travels fast in certain circles. And you felt compelled to seek me out because I have something you might want." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. "Recordings, conversations with Victoria from when we were married. Things she said about you, about your parents, about the money." My stomach tightened. "What kind of things?" "The kind of things that would make your grandfather's little intervention seem like a gentle warm-up." He set the phone on the table between us. I've been where you are, Dr. Montgomery, on the outside of that family, wondering what's real and what's performance. The difference is, I chose to marry into it. You were born into it. You never had a choice. Why would you help me? You don't even know me. James was quiet for a moment, his expression shifting into something that looked almost like shame. 2 years ago, at one of Victoria's fashion shows, you brought me coffee. I frowned, trying to remember. Victoria's fashion shows were events I'd attended out of obligation, standing in corners, trying to be invisible, hoping someone would acknowledge my presence before I slipped out early. I don't. You probably don't remember. Why would you? But I was standing alone, looking lost, and you noticed. You didn't have to. Victoria certainly never introduced us. I was just the husband, the accessory, the walking checkbook. But you saw me. You brought me coffee and asked if I was doing okay. The memory surfaced slowly. A man in an expensive suit looking uncomfortable at one of Victoria's events. A small act of kindness that had seemed insignificant at the time. I remember. That's the only time anyone in Victoria's family ever treated me like a human being. James picked up his phone, scrolling through something. I've carried that with me, and when I heard what they did to you, their own daughter, their own flesh and blood, I decided it was time to return the favor. He turned the phone toward me. On the screen was an audio file. This is from 3 years ago. Victoria and I were having dinner. She'd had a few glasses of wine and was complaining about you. Nothing unusual there, but this time she said things I never forgot. He pressed play. Victoria's voice filled the space between us, tinny through the phone speaker but unmistakable. Rachel's like a cash cow, honestly. Just keep milking her and she'll never stop. She's so desperate for Mom and Dad's approval, she'd give them her last kidney if they asked. James's voice in the recording. That seems harsh. She's your sister. Victoria, laughing. My sister is pathetic. She spent her whole life trying to earn love that was never going to be free. Mom and Dad figured out years ago that guilt makes Rachel open her wallet. It's like a reflex. Hit the right buttons and out comes the money. Don't you feel bad about that? Why would I? I didn't make her this way. She chose to be the martyr. I just choose to benefit from it. The recording ended. I realized my hands were shaking. There's more, James said quietly. Hours more. 3 years of marriage, 3 years of her saying things like that when she thought no one was paying attention. I recorded them because... He laughed bitterly. Because I was trying to convince myself I wasn't crazy, that the coldness I saw was real, not something I'd imagined. Why didn't you use these in the divorce? Because I wanted out more than I wanted revenge. The prenup protected my assets. All I had to do was walk away quietly, and I did. But then I heard about your accident, about the text message, about everything that happened, and I realized walking away quietly makes you complicit. He pushed the phone toward me. I'm going to be at your grandfather's party. Victoria didn't think to uninvite me, probably forgot I existed like she does with anyone who's no longer useful. If you want, I can play these recordings. Let everyone hear what she really thinks of you. Of all of them. I stared at the phone like it was a weapon, which, in a way, it was. Why would you do that? You'd be burning bridges, too. I've already burned them. The moment I walked out of that marriage, I stopped existing to that family. James stood up, leaving the phone on the table. Keep it. There's copies of everything on there. Recordings, dates, context. Use them however you want, or don't use them at all. It's your choice. He started to walk away, then stopped. Dr. Montgomery? One more thing. What? That night at the fashion show, when you brought me coffee, you asked if I was okay, and I said I was fine. But what I wanted to say was, I think I married the wrong sister. He left before I could respond. I sat alone in the cafeteria, Victoria's voice still echoing in my ears. Rachel's like a cash cow. Just keep milking her and she'll never stop. I picked up James's phone and slipped it into my bag. The night before the party, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft sounds of Emma and Oliver breathing in the next room. The documents Eleanor had given me were on my nightstand. James's phone was charging in the kitchen. Thomas's invitation sat on the dresser, cream-colored and elegant, like a summons to a trial. Everything was in place. The evidence, the witnesses, the stage. All that remained was my decision. Do I really want to do this? I'd asked myself that question 100 times over the past week. Each time, I'd arrived at the same answer. I didn't know. I knew I was angry. I knew I was hurt. I knew that 34 years of being invisible, of being the difficult one, of being the silent workhorse who funded everyone else's dreams while her own fell by the wayside, I knew all of that demanded some kind of response. But burning it all down? Destroying my parents in front of the entire family? Was that really what I wanted? I got out of bed and padded to the kitchen. Made myself tea, chamomile, the kind that was supposed to help with sleep but never did. Sat at the table where Thomas had sat, where Eleanor had revealed the depth of my father's betrayal. What do I actually want? Not revenge. I'd examined that possibility and found it hollow. Watching my parents suffer wouldn't undo the suffering they'd caused me. Making Victoria cry in public wouldn't fill the void where sisterly love should have been. Not money. Thomas had hinted that his will had been changed in my favor, but I'd meant what I said to him. This wasn't about inheritance. I'd supported myself since medical school. I didn't need their money, not even reconciliation. That ship had sailed the moment I'd read my mother's text message, seen my sister's laughing emoji, felt the absolute certainty that these people would never love me the way I'd needed to be loved. What I wanted, what I'd always wanted, was simply to be seen. To have someone acknowledge that I existed, that I mattered, that the sacrifices I'd made for 8 years weren't just expected but appreciated, that I was a person, not a resource, and the only way to be seen was to stop being silent. I picked up my phone and dialed Eleanor's number. It was past midnight, but she answered on the second ring. "Rachel, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I need to talk through something." "I'm listening." I took a deep breath. "I keep going back and forth about the party. Part of me wants to walk in there and burn it all down. Use everything, the documents, the recordings, all of it. Let them see exactly who Helen and Richard really are." "And the other part?" "The other part keeps asking what the point is. They're never going to change. Even if I expose everything, even if the whole family turns against them, my parents will never look at me and say, 'I'm sorry, we were wrong, you deserved better.' They're not capable of it." Eleanor was quiet for a moment. "You're right. They probably aren't. So what's the point? Why go through with this?" "Because it's not about them, Rachel. It's about you." "What do you mean?" "For 34 years, you've been living according to their rules, keeping the peace, not making waves, being the easy daughter so that maybe, eventually, they'd notice you the way they notice Victoria. You've been so focused on earning their love that you've forgotten something important." "What?" "You don't need their permission to exist. You don't need their approval to be worthy. You don't need their love to be lovable." Eleanor's voice was firm but gentle. "This confrontation isn't about changing them. It's about changing you. It's about standing up in front of your entire family and saying, 'I see what happened. I know what you did, and I refuse to pretend it was okay.'" I felt tears building behind my eyes. "What if they hate me?" "The ones who matter won't, and the ones who do." Eleanor paused. "They never deserved you anyway." Saturday dawned gray and cold, threatening rain that never quite arrived. I dressed carefully. A navy dress, professional, understated. Minimal makeup, hair pulled back in a simple style. I didn't want to look like I was trying to impress anyone. I didn't want to look like I was dressed for battle. I wanted to look like myself, whoever that was. Emma and Oliver were confused by the fancy clothes and the early morning. Maya had agreed to watch them. I wasn't bringing my children to a potential family meltdown. But I crouched down to their level before I left, holding their small hands in mine. "Mommy has to go to the party today, a grown-up party." "Can we come?" Oliver asked. "Not this time, baby, but I'll be back soon. And when I come back," I hesitated, not sure how to finish that sentence. "When I come back, things might be different." "Different how?" "I don't know yet, but different in a good way, I think." Emma studied me with her serious brown eyes. "My eyes," everyone said. Are you scared, Mommy? Out of the mouths of babes. A little bit, I admitted. But sometimes you have to do scary things. Because they're the right things. Like going to the doctor? Exactly like that. She nodded solemnly, then threw her arms around my neck. You're brave, Mommy. I held her tight, breathing in her apple shampoo smell, feeling Oliver's small body press against my side as he joined the hug. I'm trying to be, I whispered. I'm really trying. Eleanor picked me up at 10. The party started at noon, early enough to be a brunch, late enough to serve champagne. Thomas's estate in Potomac was 45 minutes away, and Eleanor wanted to arrive early before the rest of the family. How are you feeling? She asked as I climbed into her car. Like I'm about to perform surgery without anesthesia, on myself. That's about right. She pulled away from the curb. Daddy called this morning. He wanted me to tell you that it's not too late to change your mind. If you want to just attend as a guest, let him handle everything, that's fine. What do you think I should do? I think you should do whatever feels right when the moment comes. Plans are useful, but reality is messier. You might get there and decide the scorched earth approach is exactly what's needed. Or you might decide a quieter confrontation is better. Or you might decide to say nothing at all and let Daddy do the talking. She glanced at me. There's no wrong answer, Rachel. There's just the answer that lets you live with yourself afterward. I thought about that as we drove. The manila folder in my bag felt heavier than its actual weight. James's phone was in my pocket, the recordings loaded and ready. What answer lets me live with myself? I didn't know yet, but I had 45 minutes to figure it out. Thomas's estate looked like something out of a period drama. White columns, wraparound porch, 3 acres of manicured grounds. The kind of old-money elegance that whispered rather than shouted. I'd visited here as a child, before my mother had found ways to keep us apart. I remembered running through the gardens, catching fireflies in the summer dusk, feeling safe in a way I rarely felt at home. That was before I understood the dynamics of my family. Before I learned that some children were seen and others were invisible. Eleanor pulled into the circular driveway. A few other cars were already there, catering vans, a florist's truck. Inside, the party would be taking shape, tables being set, flowers being arranged, champagne being chilled. Ready? Eleanor asked. No. Good. The ready feeling is overrated anyway. We went inside. Thomas was in his study, the same room where I'd seen him holding his late wife's photograph. He looked older than he had 2 weeks ago. The cancer was progressing, stealing pieces of him even as he prepared this final act. Rachel. He stood when I entered, pulling me into a gentle hug. I wasn't sure you'd come. Neither was I. Right up until about an hour ago. What changed your mind? I thought about Emma's arms around my neck, about her words. You're brave, Mommy. I decided I wanted my children to know that their mother stood up for herself, even when it was hard, even when it was scary, even when it would have been easier to stay silent. Thomas's eyes glistened. Margaret would have loved you. She did love you. She always said you were the best of all of them, the only one who had her head on straight. I wish I'd known her better. So do I. He squeezed my hand. There's something I need to tell you before the others arrive, something I should have said 2 weeks ago, but I wanted you to make this decision without it weighing on you. What is it? I've changed my will. When I'm gone, and that won't be long now, the bulk of my estate goes to you. Not to Helen, not to Victoria. To you and your children. Grandpa, I can't. You can, and you will. His voice was firm. You've spent 8 years supporting people who didn't deserve it. Consider this the universe's way of balancing the scales. How much are we talking about? He told me. The number was staggering, enough to pay off my student loans, enough to buy a house outright, enough to fund Emma and Oliver's education through graduate school, enough to change everything. This isn't about the money, I said, my voice shaking. I know, but money is what they took from you. Let this be what I give back. The guests began arriving at noon. I watched from a window in the upper hallway as cars pulled into the driveway, one after another. Aunts and uncles I hadn't seen in years. Cousins who'd grown from children into adults since our last meeting. the extended family that had existed on the periphery of my life, connected by blood but not by presence. 50 people, maybe more, all of them carrying some version of my family's story in their heads. The story my parents had been telling for 30 years. The successful older daughter and the difficult younger one. The grateful parents and the distant child. The perfect family with one small imperfection. Me. They arrived in clusters, greeting each other with hugs and exclamations. I recognized faces from old photographs, heard names I'd half forgotten. The family that could have been mine, if circumstances had been different. And then, at 20 minutes past noon, a silver Mercedes pulled up. My parents. Helen emerged first, elegant in cream-colored silk, her hair perfectly styled. She looked exactly like what she was, the hostess's daughter, the matriarch in training, the center of every room she entered. Richard followed, distinguished in his best suit, the picture of a successful patriarch. Then Victoria. Designer dress, flawless makeup, the kind of careful beauty that took hours to achieve. She looked like she was walking a red carpet, not attending her grandfather's birthday party. They hadn't seen me yet. They didn't know I was here. I watched them enter the house, heard Helen's voice carrying up the stairs. Bright, charming, the perfect daughter returning home. I heard Richard laughing at something someone said. I heard Victoria air-kissing cousins, accepting compliments, playing the role she'd been born to play. The golden child, the favorite, the one they'd always seen. I took a deep breath. It's time. I descended the main staircase slowly, giving myself time to be noticed. Eleanor was waiting at the bottom, a glass of champagne in her hand and something like fierce pride in her eyes. The room quieted slightly as I appeared. Not dramatically, I wasn't important enough for that, but there were murmurs, glances, a subtle shift in attention. Then Helen saw me. Her face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Surprise, confusion, something that might have been fear. She set down her champagne glass and crossed the room toward me, Richard a step behind. "Rachel." Her voice was controlled, but I could hear the strain underneath. "We didn't expect you. Grandpa invited me." "Yes, but after everything." She lowered her voice. "After the misunderstanding." "Which misunderstanding are you referring to? The one where I almost died, or the one where you couldn't be bothered to answer the phone?" Richard's hand closed around Helen's arm. "This isn't the place." "Then where is the place, Dad? Because you've had 2 weeks to reach out and my phone has been silent." "We tried to call," Helen said. "Your number wasn't working." "My number works fine. I blocked you." I kept my voice even, conversational. "After you told me to figure it out while I was bleeding in an ambulance." Helen's face flushed. "That's not— I didn't mean—" "You meant exactly what you said, Mom. You always do." Victoria appeared, drawn by the tension. "What's going on? Rachel, what are you doing here?" "Attending my grandfather's birthday party, same as you." "You look—" Victoria's eyes swept over me, searching for flaws. "You look tired." "Near-death experiences will do that." The air between us crackled. Family members were watching now, pretending to be engaged in other conversations while their attention focused on our little group. The perfect facade was cracking, and everyone could sense it. Thomas chose that moment to make his entrance. "Everyone!" he called out, his voice carrying effortlessly across the room. "Thank you all for coming. Before we continue with the festivities, I have a few things I'd like to say." The room fell silent. My mother's face went pale, and I realized, with a clarity that felt like freedom, that there was no going back now. The truth was coming, whether any of us were ready for it or not. The room held its breath. 53 people, I counted them, a nervous habit from childhood, stood frozen with champagne glasses in hand, canapes halfway to mouths, conversations suspended mid-sentence. Thomas commanded attention the way he always had, the way 40 years on the federal bench had taught him. When Judge Thomas Whitfield spoke, people listened. "Before we continue with the festivities," he said, his voice carrying effortlessly to every corner of the grand living room, "I have a few things I'd like to say." I watched my parents from across the room. Helen's face had gone pale beneath her careful makeup. Richard's jaw was tight, his hand still gripping Helen's arm like an anchor. Victoria stood slightly apart from them, her expression shifting between confusion and something that looked almost like fear. They knew. On some level, they knew what was coming. "Daddy!" Helen's voice cut through the silence, bright and brittle. "Shouldn't we wait until after dinner? The caterers have everything timed." "This won't take long." Thomas's tone left no room for argument. "And I think it's important that everyone hears what I have to say while we're all together, as a family." He paused, letting the word hang in the air. Family. Such a simple word. Such a complicated reality. "I'm 78 years old today. By most measures, I've lived a good life, a successful career, a beautiful home, children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren." His eyes found Emma and Oliver's photos on the mantel. I'd noticed them when I arrived, tucked in among the family portraits. But lately, I've been thinking about legacy, about what we leave behind, about the stories we tell ourselves and the stories we tell others. Helen shifted uncomfortably. Richard's grip on her arm tightened. "Our family has a story," Thomas continued. "A story we've been telling for 30 years or more. It's a story about two sisters, one successful and glamorous, the other practical and capable. One who needs support and encouragement, the other who can handle things on her own. One who is celebrated, the other who is convenient." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Heads turned toward me, toward Victoria, toward our parents. "I've let that story go unchallenged for too long. Today, I'd like to tell a different version." "Daddy, please!" Helen stepped forward, her voice cracking. "Whatever this is about, we can discuss it privately." "No, Helen, we can't." Thomas's voice hardened. "Because privacy is how lies survive. Privacy is how exploitation continues. Privacy is how a daughter ends up bleeding in an ambulance while her family goes to a concert." The room went absolutely still. "What are you talking about?" someone asked. Cousin Michael, I thought, from somewhere near the back. "I'm glad you asked." Thomas reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folder. My folder. The one containing 8 years of financial records, organized and annotated by Eleanor. "Let me share some facts with the family. I think you'll find them illuminating." Thomas opened the folder with deliberate slowness, the way I imagined he'd once opened case files in his courtroom. Every movement precise. Every pause calculated. 8 years ago, my granddaughter Rachel finished medical school. She was 26 years old, hundreds of thousands of dollars in student debt, about to begin one of the most grueling residency programs in the country. He looked up. That same year, her father Richard called her with a request. The mortgage payment was due, and things were tight. Could she help out? Just this once. I watched my father's face. The color was draining from it, slowly, like water from a tub. "Just this once," Thomas repeated. 3 words. Such small words, but they became the foundation of something much larger. He pulled out the first page of documents. Mortgage payments. $2,400 per month for 96 consecutive months. Total, $230,400. Gasps from the crowd. Someone, Aunt Patricia, I thought, actually dropped her champagne glass. "That's the house Richard and Helen live in. The house they've told everyone they own outright. The house they've hosted Christmas dinners in and summer barbecues in and birthday parties in, all paid for by their daughter Rachel, who wasn't invited to most of those gatherings." "That's not," Richard started. "I'm not finished." Thomas's voice cracked like a whip. Richard fell silent. "Health insurance premiums, $800 per month for 96 months. Total, $76,800. When Richard's company dropped their coverage, Rachel picked up the bill. While she was working 100-hour weeks in residency, while she was raising infant twins alone, while their father," his voice caught slightly, "while the children's father had walked out during her 5th month of pregnancy." More gasps. More whispers. I felt the room's attention swinging toward me, heavy and hot. "Emergency expenses," Thomas continued, flipping to the next page. "A new car transmission, $3,200. A roof repair, $12,000. Dental implants, $8,500. HVAC replacement, $7,800. A business loan to Victoria that was never repaid, $15,000. Victoria flinched at her name. Her perfect composure was cracking piece by piece. Total emergency expenses, $46,500, plus miscellaneous gifts and contributions over 8 years, approximately $12,000. Thomas closed the folder. Grand total, $364,700. Yea, the number landed like a bomb. I heard it repeated in whispers throughout the room. 364,000. 364,000. For context, Eleanor spoke up from beside me, her voice clear and steady. That's more than most Americans earn in 7 years of full-time work. Rachel provided this support while completing her medical residency, one of the most demanding training programs in existence, while raising twin infants as a single mother, while receiving virtually no emotional support from the family she was funding. She offered, Helen said desperately. We never forced her. She wanted to help. Did she? Thomas's eyes fixed on his daughter. Or did you make her feel like she had no choice? Did you call her with emergencies that were never quite emergencies? Did you make her feel guilty for having a stable income when her sister was struggling? Did you teach her from childhood that her value was in what she could provide? Helen's mouth opened and closed. No words came out. I'm not suggesting you held a gun to her head, Thomas continued, his voice softening slightly but losing none of its edge. I'm simply establishing facts, and the facts are these. For 8 years, Rachel Montgomery has been the invisible backbone of this family. She paid bills that weren't hers. She funded lifestyles she wasn't invited to share. She gave and gave and gave, and what did she get in return? He paused, letting the question hang. I'll tell you what she got. 2 months ago, Rachel was in a car accident. A serious one. Her spleen ruptured. She was bleeding internally, being rushed to emergency surgery. From the ambulance, she called her parents. Her children were home with a babysitter who was about to leave. She needed someone, anyone, to watch them for a few hours while doctors tried to save her life. The room was utterly silent now. Even the catering staff had frozen in place. This, Thomas said, pulling out his phone, is the text message she received in response, from Helen. I'll read it exactly as it was written. He cleared his throat. Rachel, you've always been the difficult one. We have Taylor Swift tickets with Victoria tonight. We've been planning this for months. Your father isn't feeling well, and I can't deal with your drama right now. Figure it out like you always do. Someone sobbed. I couldn't tell who. Richard's response, Thomas continued, was, Your mother's right. You're resourceful. Don't make this into a bigger deal than it needs to be. He looked up from the phone. Victoria's response was a laughing emoji. The silence lasted exactly 4 seconds. Then the room exploded. Oh, my God! How could you... Is this true? Helen, is this true? That's not what happened! Helen's voice rose above the chaos, shrill with desperation. You're taking it out of context. We didn't know it was serious. You didn't ask if it was serious. The words tore out of me before I could stop them. I called you from an ambulance. I told you I needed surgery, and you sent me a text message calling me a nuisance. Difficult, Helen corrected automatically. I said difficult, not... Does it matter? My voice cracked. Does the specific word matter when your daughter is dying and you're worried about concert tickets? The crowd had shifted now, creating a clear space between my family and me. Battle lines being drawn, people choosing sides. Richard stepped forward, attempting to regain control. This has all been blown out of proportion. Rachel has always been... sensitive. She misinterprets things. What happened was a miscommunication. A miscommunication? Eleanor's voice was sharp. Richard, I have the text messages. I have the bank records. I have 8 years of evidence that shows exactly what kind of parents you've been. This isn't about interpretation. This is about facts. You always hated us, Helen spat at her sister. You've always been jealous of my family, my life. Your life? Eleanor laughed, but there was no humor in it. Helen, your life is a lie. Your house was paid for by the daughter you ignore. Your lifestyle is funded by a woman you called a burden. Everything you have, everything you are, is built on Rachel's silence and sacrifice. That's enough. Victoria pushed forward, her composure reassembling itself into something colder, harder. This is ridiculous. You're all acting like we're monsters. Rachel chose to help. Nobody forced her. If she has regrets now, that's her problem, not ours. Chose? I turned to face my sister. You think I chose this? I was raised to believe that this was what family meant, that love had to be earned, that if I just gave enough, sacrificed enough, maybe someday you'd all see me the way you see each other. We do see you. No, you don't. You never have. My voice was steadier now, the initial rush of emotion settling into something deeper. I was always the other one, the difficult one, the one who wasn't quite good enough, no matter how many degrees I earned or how much money I sent or how many times I showed up for events where nobody noticed I was there. That's not fair. Fair? I laughed. Victoria, you sent a laughing emoji while I was bleeding to death. What part of that is fair? Victoria's face twisted. I didn't know. You didn't care. That's the difference. You didn't care enough to ask, to call back, to check. You saw Mom's text and you thought it was funny. Your sister dying and you laughed. The crowd murmured. I saw cousins I barely knew looking at Victoria with new eyes. The golden child, tarnishing in real time. This is a family matter, Richard tried again. It shouldn't be aired in public like this. No. Thomas's voice cut through. This is exactly where it should be aired, because for 30 years Helen has been controlling the narrative, telling everyone what a wonderful family you are, what a difficult child Rachel was, how hard you tried with her. The family deserves to know the truth. What truth? That our ungrateful daughter has decided to air our dirty laundry in public? Helen's voice had gone cold, the panic crystallizing into something harder. Rachel has always been dramatic, always seeking attention. This is just another example. Attention? I stared at my mother. You think I want attention? I spent my entire childhood trying to be invisible because visibility meant criticism. I got straight A's in silence because celebrating would seem like showing off. I went to medical school without asking for a penny because I knew you'd hold it over my head. I have spent 34 years trying to need nothing from you, and you have the audacity to accuse me of seeking attention? If you didn't want attention, why are you doing this? Because I'm tired. My voice broke on the word. I'm tired of being invisible. I'm tired of funding your life while being excluded from it. I'm tired of loving people who can't be bothered to love me back. I'm tired of pretending this is normal, that this is what families do, that I should be grateful for whatever scraps of acknowledgement you throw my way. Tears were streaming down my face now. I didn't try to stop them. I almost died, Mom. I almost died, and you couldn't spare an hour to watch your grandchildren. That text message, that laughing emoji, that was the end of something. I don't know what exactly, but whatever thread was holding us together, you cut it that night. The room was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet. Heavier, sadder. The quiet of people witnessing something break. Then James Hartley stepped forward. I'd almost forgotten he was there, standing near the back with a glass of whiskey he hadn't touched. Victoria's ex-husband, the wild card none of them had expected. I wasn't going to say anything, he said, his voice carrying easily in the silence. I came here planning to just observe. Maybe enjoy watching Victoria squirm a little, but I think the family deserves to know exactly who they've been defending all these years. Victoria's face went white. James, don't what? Don't tell them what you really think of your sister? Don't share the things you said during our marriage when you thought no one was listening? He pulled out his phone. I have recordings, hours of them, 3 years of Victoria talking about Rachel, about your parents, about the money. Would you like to hear some highlights? This is outrageous, Richard sputtered. You can't just... I can, actually. Maryland is a one-party consent state. I had every right to record conversations I was part of. James smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. One of the benefits of being married to a lawyer's daughter, You learn to cover your bases. He pressed play. Victoria's voice filled the room, tinny through the phone speaker but unmistakable. Rachel's like a cash cow, honestly. Just keep milking her and she'll never stop. She's so desperate for Mom and Dad's approval, she'd give them her last kidney if they asked. The crowd reacted like they'd been slapped. James's voice on the recording. That seems harsh. She's your sister. Victoria, laughing. My sister is pathetic. She spent her whole life trying to earn love that was never going to be free. Mom and Dad figured out years ago that guilt makes Rachel open her wallet. It's like a reflex. Hit the right buttons and out comes the money. Victoria lunged for the phone. Turn it off! James held it out of reach. There's more. Do you want me to play the one where you call her a useful idiot? Or the one where you say she deserves to be alone because who would want to be with someone that desperate? Stop it! Victoria's scream echoed off the high ceilings. Her perfect facade had shattered completely now. Mascara running, face contorted, the ugliness beneath the beauty finally visible. You had no right to record me. Those were private conversations. Private? I heard my own voice, distant and strange. You thought calling me a cash cow was private? You thought mocking me for being desperate was something that should stay between you and your husband? I didn't mean... I was venting. You meant every word. I stepped toward her and she actually backed away. You've always meant every word. Every dismissive comment, every backhanded compliment, every time you made me feel small and stupid and worthless. That wasn't venting. That was you. Rachel. No. I held up my hand. I'm done. I'm done trying to earn your respect. I'm done hoping you'll wake up one day and see me as a person instead of a resource. I'm done. I turned to face the room. All those faces, some sympathetic, some shocked, some still processing what they'd heard. I didn't come here for revenge, I said. I didn't come here to humiliate anyone, even though they deserve it. I came here because I spent 34 years believing a lie, believing that if I just tried hard enough, gave enough, sacrificed enough, my family would finally love me the way I needed to be loved. My voice steadied. That was the lie. The truth is, some people aren't capable of that kind of love. Not because there's something wrong with me, but because there's something wrong with them. And no amount of money or time or energy can fix it. I looked at my parents, standing shell-shocked and small in the middle of the chaos they'd created. I forgive you, I said quietly. Not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to carry this weight anymore. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It doesn't mean I'll go back to funding your lifestyle or pretending everything is fine. It means I'm letting go, for good. The room was still processing when Thomas spoke again. There's one more thing the family should know. His voice was tired now, the effort of the confrontation taking its toll. I saw Eleanor move closer to him, ready to catch him if he faltered. Helen, Thomas said, looking at his daughter with something like pity. Would you like to tell them, or should I? Helen's face crumpled. Daddy, please. 2 years ago, Helen was diagnosed with early-onset dementia. A new wave of gasps, new murmurs of shock and sympathy. It's mild still, Thomas continued, manageable with medication. But it explains some things, the memory lapses, the confusion, the moments where she seems to lose track of reality. For a moment, I felt something shift in my chest. Dementia. My mother was sick. Maybe that explained. However, Thomas's voice hardened. It does not explain everything. Richard has known about the diagnosis from the beginning, and in those 2 years, while Helen's judgment has been compromised, he has increased the financial demands on Rachel. Not decreased. Increased. He pulled out more documents, Eleanor's documents, the ones showing the secondary account, the hidden transfers. Richard has been taking money from the funds Rachel sends and funneling it to Victoria, approximately $45,000 over 6 years. He set up a hidden account specifically for this purpose. Helen may or may not know. I suspect she's been told a version of events that protects Richard's actions. But make no mistake, this was deliberate, calculated, strategic exploitation of his own daughter. Richard's face had gone gray. You can't prove... I can prove every cent. Eleanor stepped forward, her voice cold. I have the bank statements, the transfer records, the account information. You've been stealing from Rachel for years, Richard, using her guilt, her love, her desperate desire for your approval, and pocketing the surplus for your favorite daughter. Victoria whirled on her father. You told me that money was from your retirement fund. You said you were helping me because you believed in my business. You lied to me? Victoria's voice cracked. You let me take money that was stolen from Rachel? It wasn't stolen. It was exactly stolen. Victoria's composure was completely gone now, replaced by a kind of wild horror. All those years I believed. She turned to me, and for the first time in my memory, I saw genuine shame in my sister's eyes. I didn't know about the money. I swear I didn't know it was coming from you. Would it have mattered? I asked quietly. If you'd known? Victoria opened her mouth, closed it, couldn't answer. That's what I thought. The party was over. Not officially. The catering staff still circulated. The champagne still flowed. But the celebration had ended the moment Thomas opened that folder. My parents left first. Helen was crying. Real tears, I thought, though I couldn't be sure anymore what was real with her. Richard guided her out with his head down, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. They didn't say goodbye. They didn't look back. Victoria lingered longer, standing alone in a corner while relatives who'd been fawning over her an hour ago gave her a wide berth. The golden child, no longer golden. I watched her down 3 glasses of champagne in quick succession before finally walking out without a word. James approached me as the crowd began to thin. I'm sorry if that was too much, he said. The recordings. I should have asked you first. It's fine. I surprised myself by meaning it. They needed to hear it. I needed to hear it, even though I already knew. Knowing and hearing are different things. Yes, they are. He handed me his phone. Keep the recordings. There's more on there. Things I didn't play. In case you ever need them. For legal purposes, or... He shrugged. Or just to remind yourself that you're not crazy. That it wasn't in your head. Thank you. Thank me by living well. He smiled, and for the first time, it seemed genuine. That's the best revenge, you know. Not this. He gestured at the chaos around us. But a good life. Happy kids. People who actually deserve your love. He left, and I stood alone in the middle of my grandfather's living room, surrounded by the wreckage of my family. Eleanor found me on the back porch an hour later. The sun was setting over the grounds, painting everything in shades of gold and orange. The caterers had packed up. The guests had gone. Inside, Thomas was resting in his study, exhausted from the confrontation. How are you feeling? Eleanor asked, sitting down beside me. I don't know. I stared at the manicured gardens, the ones I'd played in as a child. Empty, I think. I expected to feel, I don't know, triumphant, vindicated. But you don't? I feel sad, which doesn't make sense. They deserved everything that happened in there, every word, every revelation, every moment of humiliation. And yet, I sighed. They're still my parents. She's still my sister. Some part of me wanted this to end differently, wanted them to hear the truth and suddenly understand, suddenly change, suddenly become the family I always needed them to be. That's not how it works. I know, I've always known, but knowing doesn't stop the wanting. Eleanor put her arm around me. The wanting is what makes you human, Rachel. It's what makes you different from them. You wanted love, you wanted connection, you wanted family. Those are good things to want. But I wanted them from people who couldn't give them. Yes, and that's the tragedy. Not that you wanted too much, but that you wanted from the wrong people. We sat in silence for a while, watching the sun sink below the tree line. What happens now? I finally asked. Now? Eleanor squeezed my shoulder. Now you go home to your children. You build a life that isn't organized around people who don't deserve you. You let yourself grieve what you never had, and you stop waiting for it to appear. Just like that? Not just like that. It'll take time. There'll be hard days, days when you miss them despite everything. days when you question whether you did the right thing. But eventually, she smiled softly, eventually, the weight you've been carrying will be gone. And you'll realize you can stand up straight for the first time in your life. I thought about Emma and Oliver, waiting for me at home, about David, who'd texted me 3 times during the party to check if I was okay, about Maggie, who'd become more like family in 2 months than my blood relatives had been in 34 years. I think I'm ready for that, I said. Good. Eleanor stood up. Because you deserve it. You've always deserved it. And now, finally, you're going to get it. Thomas called me into his study before I left. He looked smaller than he had that morning, the confrontation having cost him more than he'd let on. The cancer was progressing, stealing pieces of him even as he tried to set things right. I'm proud of you, he said simply. I didn't do anything. You did all the work. You showed up. You stood your ground. You told the truth. He took my hand in both of his. That's not nothing, Rachel. That's everything. What happens now, with Mom and Dad? That's up to them. They can pretend none of this happened, blame everyone but themselves, continue the patterns that got them here. Or they can look in the mirror and decide to change. He shook his head slowly. I'm not optimistic, but I've been surprised before. And Victoria? Victoria is going to have to rebuild herself from the ground up. Everything she thought she knew about her life, her success, her parents' support, her place in the family, all of it was built on your sacrifice. That's not an easy thing to reckon with. I thought about my sister's face when she'd learned about the money, the genuine shock, the shame. Do you think she'll reach out? Maybe. Someday. Whether you answer is up to you. Thomas squeezed my hand. But Rachel, and I want you to hear this, you don't owe her anything. Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation. Not another chance. You gave that family 34 years of chances. You've earned the right to be done. I know. Do you? Really? I met his eyes, sharp and sad and tired. I'm learning to. He smiled. That's all any of us can do. I drove home as the last light faded from the sky. The roads were quiet, empty. Inside the car, the silence felt different than it had before. Not heavy, not oppressive, but peaceful, like the calm after a storm finally passes. My phone buzzed. A text from David. How did it go? I thought about how to answer, about the chaos and the revelations and the things that could never be unsaid. It went, I typed back. I'll tell you everything tomorrow. But I'm okay. Really okay. Glad to hear it. The kids are asking when you'll be home. Tell them soon. Tell them Mommy loves them. They know. But I'll tell them anyway. I set down the phone and kept driving. Behind me, the life I'd known was crumbling. The family I'd sacrificed everything for was finally seeing the truth, whether they wanted to or not. Ahead of me, my children were waiting. My real family. The people who loved me not for what I could give, but for who I was. The weight I'd carried for 34 years was finally lifting, and for the first time, I could breathe. 6 months passed. They passed the way time does after a storm, slowly at first. Each day waited with the echoes of what had happened, then gradually picking up speed as new routines replaced old ones, as the sharp edges of memory softened into something more bearable. I moved out of my old apartment in April. The decision came suddenly, or at least it felt sudden. One morning I woke up, looked around the cramped 2-bedroom that had been my home for 3 years, and realized I didn't want to be there anymore. Every corner held a memory I was trying to outgrow. The kitchen table where I'd sat calculating how much I could afford to send my parents each month. The couch where I'd collapsed after 18-hour shifts wondering if this was all life would ever be. The window I'd stared through on countless sleepless nights, waiting for a phone call from family that never came. The new place was in Roland Park, a quiet neighborhood with tree-lined streets and good schools. Victorian houses with wraparound porches, children riding bikes on sidewalks, the kind of place I'd driven through as a resident and thought, someday, maybe, if everything works out. Now, someday was here. The house itself was modest by Roland Park standards, a 3-bedroom Cape Cod with original hardwood floors and a kitchen that needed updating. But it had a backyard with an old oak tree perfect for a swing set, and a sunroom that flooded with light every morning, and enough space for Emma and Oliver to run without crashing into furniture. Most importantly, it was mine. Paid for not by the inheritance Thomas had promised. He was still alive, stubbornly fighting the cancer that should have taken him months ago. But by the money I'd been sending to my parents for 8 years. $3,200 a month. That's what I had now every month that I hadn't had before. The math was simple but staggering. In 6 months, I'd saved almost $20,000, more than I'd managed to save in the previous 3 years combined. I'd paid off 2 credit cards, started a college fund for the twins, put a down payment on a house that would be fully mine in 30 years, all from money that had been disappearing into my parents' lifestyle without a trace. I tried not to think about it too much, tried not to calculate what I could have had, what I could have done if I'd stopped the payments years ago. That way lay bitterness, and I was trying very hard not to be bitter. But sometimes, late at night, I'd look around my new house, my children's house, our home, and feel a rage so deep it frightened me. Not at my parents exactly, at myself. For all the years I'd let them take and take and take, telling myself it was love, telling myself it was family, telling myself that someday they'd see what I'd sacrificed and it would all be worth it. It was never going to be worth it. That was the truth I was still learning to accept. The twins adjusted to the new house with the resilience of 4-year-olds. For them, the move was an adventure, a new room to explore, a new backyard to conquer, new neighbors with dogs they could pet and children they could befriend. Within a week, they'd claimed every corner of the house as their own, leaving a trail of toys and artwork and muddy footprints that I pretended to be annoyed by but secretly loved. "Mommy, can we paint my wall purple?" Emma asked one evening, standing in the middle of her new bedroom with her hands on her hips, a pose she'd learned from me, apparently. "I want purple with stars." "We can definitely talk about purple walls." "And Oliver wants dinosaurs." "Dinosaurs and purple stars. Got it." I'd never been able to give them things like this before. Personalized bedrooms. A space that was truly theirs. My old apartment had been functional, practical, the best I could afford while hemorrhaging money to people who didn't appreciate it. Now I could think about purple walls and dinosaur murals and all the small luxuries that added up to a childhood. It felt like healing. Slow, imperfect, but real. David became a regular presence in our new life. We'd been dating officially for 4 months now. Slowly, carefully, the way 2 wounded people learned to trust again. He'd lost his wife to cancer 18 months before my accident, and the grief still lived in him the way my family's betrayal lived in me. We understood each other's damage without having to explain it. Our relationship didn't look like the movies. There were no grand gestures, no sweeping declarations. Instead, there were Saturday mornings when he'd show up with bagels and terrible jokes that made Emma giggle and Oliver groan. Sunday afternoons assembling IKEA furniture while the twins supervised from a pile of packing peanuts. Quiet evenings on my new back porch, drinking wine and watching fireflies while the kids slept inside. "You seem different," he said one night, about 3 months after I'd moved. "Lighter somehow." "I feel lighter." I swirled my wine, watching the last light fade from the sky. I didn't realize how heavy everything was until I put it down. The money thing? Not just the money, the whole performance, trying to be what they wanted, hoping that if I just gave enough, tried hard enough, they'd finally see me. I shook my head. I spent 34 years auditioning for a role I was never going to get. And now? Now I'm writing my own part. David reached over and took my hand. His grip was warm, steady, the hands of a man who'd held dying patients with compassion and rebuilt his life from rubble with determination. "For what it's worth," he said, "I think you're doing a hell of a job." Maggie O'Brien had become family. Not the family I'd been born into. That family was a wound still healing, a story still being written, but family in the truest sense. The family you chose, the family that showed up. She'd started as an emergency nanny, a stranger's voice on the phone while I bled in an ambulance. She'd become something irreplaceable. 3 days a week, she picked up the twins from preschool when my shifts ran long. She taught Emma Irish folk songs with lyrics I couldn't understand, but melodies that made my heart ache. She taught Oliver to make soda bread, letting him punch the dough with his small fists while flour dusted everything within a 10-foot radius. She called me a store, my treasure, and fussed over me like the mother I'd never really had. "You're too thin," she announced one evening, bustling into my kitchen with a casserole dish. "Working too hard. When's the last time you had a proper meal?" "I eat. Hospital cafeteria garbage doesn't count." She set the dish on my counter and fixed me with a stern look that would have made her pediatric patients quake. "Sit. Eat. Doctor's orders." "You're a nurse." "Close enough. And I've got 30 years of experience that says you're not taking care of yourself." I sat. I ate. The casserole was delicious, some Irish recipe involving lamb and root vegetables that tasted like comfort felt. "How did you end up doing emergency nanny work?" I asked between bites. "You were a pediatric nurse for decades. This seems like a strange second career." Maggie settled into the chair across from me, wrapping her hands around a cup of tea. "After my husband passed 8 years ago now, I couldn't stand the silence. The house was too empty. I'd spent 40 years with someone, and then suddenly I was alone." She smiled, but it was tinged with old sadness. "I thought about going back to nursing, but my knees weren't what they used to be. Too much time on my feet. So I started doing childcare instead. Figured I could keep busy without destroying my joints. But emergency work? The middle of the night calls? Those are my favorites, actually." Her eyes crinkled. "People don't call emergency services unless they truly need help. There's no pretense, no politeness. Just, 'Please, I need you,' and I can say yes, I can show up." She reached across and patted my hand. "The night you called from that ambulance, you needed someone, and I could be that someone. That's not a strange career, a store. That's a calling." I thought about that night. The terror of the accident, the devastation of my parents' text message, the desperate phone call to strangers while doctors prepared to cut me open, and then Maggie's voice, warm and certain through the phone. "Don't you worry about those little ones, Dr. Montgomery. Your babies will be safe." "You saved me," I said quietly. "Not just my children. Me." "Ah, no." Maggie shook her head. "You saved yourself. I just watched your kids while you did it." She stayed late that night, helping me put the twins to bed. Emma demanded 3 stories. Oliver demanded 4. Maggie negotiated them down to 2 stories and a song, then sang something in Gaelic that made them both drift off within minutes. "How do you do that?" I whispered as we crept out of their room. "I can never get them down that fast." "Secret Irish magic. I'll teach you someday." She winked. "But not tonight. Tonight, you're going to sit on your couch and drink tea and tell me how you're really doing." "I told you I'm fine. Rachel." Her voice was gentle but firm. "I've known you for 6 months. I've watched you rebuild your life from the ground up while working full-time and raising 2 children alone. I've seen you on good days and bad days and everything in between. So when I ask how you're really doing, I'm not asking for fine. I'm asking for the truth." I sank onto the couch. The truth. Such a simple thing, such a complicated thing. "I'm okay. Most days. Better than okay, some days." I pulled a throw pillow into my lap, needing something to hold on to. "It's strange, though. I spent so long in crisis mode, the accident, the confrontation, the aftermath, that I don't quite know what to do with normal. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop." "That's trauma, love. It doesn't disappear just because the crisis is over." "I know. I'm a doctor. I know all about trauma, clinically, but living it is different than treating it." "It always is." Maggie sat beside me, close enough to be comforting without crowding. "What's the hardest part? Right now? Today?" I thought about it, really thought past the automatic "I'm fine" that I'd been trained to offer. "The quiet," I finally said. "My phone doesn't ring with emergencies anymore. No one needs money or help or fixing. And I should be relieved. I am relieved, but part of me doesn't know who I am without someone to rescue. I built my entire identity around being useful, and now you have to figure out who you are when you're not being used." The words landed like a diagnosis, accurate, uncomfortable. True. Yes, exactly. Maggie nodded slowly. That's not weakness, Rachel. That's growth. Painful, messy, necessary growth. You spent 34 years learning to disappear for other people. It's going to take more than 6 months to learn how to take up space for yourself. How do I do that? Learn to take up space? The same way you do anything else. She smiled. One day at a time, one choice at a time, one moment of choosing yourself over the people who taught you not to. I leaned my head back against the couch, suddenly exhausted. That sounds hard. It is hard, but you've already done the hardest part. She reached over and squeezed my hand. You survived. Everything else is just details. The rest of the family had sorted itself into factions, as families do after earthquakes. Eleanor kept me updated through weekly phone calls. Not gossip exactly, but information. Context. The broader picture of what my confrontation had set in motion. Your parents had to sell the house, she told me in July, about 4 months after the party. The listing went up last week. Asking price is about $150,000 less than what it's worth. They need to sell fast. I felt a strange mixture of emotions at the news. Satisfaction, maybe, or vindication, but also a hollow kind of sadness for what could have been if they'd only been different people. Where will they go? Frank's offered them his guest house. Temporarily, he says, but we both know how that goes. Eleanor's voice was careful, neutral. Your father's taken a job at a hardware store, part-time. First real employment he's had in almost a decade. And Mom? The dementia is progressing, slowly but noticeably. She has good days and bad days. On good days, she almost seems like her old self. On bad days, Eleanor paused. On bad days, she doesn't remember why everyone's upset with her. She thinks it's still 5 years ago, that everything's fine, that you're still sending money every month like clockwork. I closed my eyes. That was the cruelest part, perhaps. Helen's mind was failing, and she would never fully understand what she'd done. She would never have the reckoning I'd imagined, the moment of clarity where she saw her own behavior clearly and felt the weight of remorse. She would simply fade, piece by piece, until the woman who'd written that text message no longer existed. I don't know how to feel about that, I admitted. You don't have to know. You can feel angry and sad and relieved all at once. That's allowed. Is it? Rachel. Eleanor's voice softened. You're not a monster for having complicated feelings about complicated people. Your parents did terrible things. Your mother is also sick. Both of those can be true simultaneously. I keep waiting to feel guilty, for cutting them off, for the confrontation, for everything that's happened since. And I don't. I feel sad sometimes. I feel angry sometimes. But guilty? I shook my head, even though she couldn't see it. No, not guilty. Good, because you have nothing to be guilty for. You didn't cause this. You just stopped preventing it. Victoria's downfall had been swifter and more public. In the weeks after the party, the recordings had spread through certain circles. Fashion industry connections, mutual acquaintances, the kind of whisper network that could make or break careers. No one published them. No one needed to. The knowledge of their existence was enough. Within a month, Victoria had lost her 2 biggest contracts. The designers who'd been willing to work with her suddenly had scheduling conflicts and creative differences. The boutiques that had carried her line quietly stopped placing orders. The magazine features that had been in the works were postponed indefinitely. Within 3 months, she'd lost her apartment in Manhattan. The rent had been $4,500 a month, a number she'd been able to afford, I now knew, only because of the money our father had been secretly funneling to her from my payments. Without that subsidy, she couldn't come close. Last I'd heard, through Eleanor's careful network of family informants, Victoria was living in a studio apartment in Hoboken, New Jersey, working part-time at a department store makeup counter, trying to rebuild her design business from scratch with no funding, no connections, and a reputation that preceded her everywhere she went. Part of me expected to feel triumphant about this. The golden child, brought low, the favorite sister, facing consequences for the first time in her life. But mostly, I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not pity, just a curious emptiness where the complicated tangle of sisterly love and resentment used to be. We hadn't spoken since the party. I didn't expect we ever would. The extended family had realigned in ways I was still processing. Cousins who'd barely acknowledged my existence for years suddenly reached out with apologies and invitations. Aunts and uncles who'd believed my mother's version of events for decades were reconsidering everything they thought they knew. "I feel awful," my cousin Michael told me at a family gathering in August, one of the first I'd attended since the confrontation. "All those years I just assumed. Helen always made it sound like you were the difficult one, like you'd pulled away for no reason. I never thought to question it." "You didn't know." "I should have asked. I should have reached out instead of just accepting what I was told." He looked genuinely distressed, this man I'd barely known as an adult. "I'm sorry, Rachel, for all of it." I found myself offering absolution I hadn't known I had in me. "You believed what you were told. That's human nature. What matters is what you do now. Now I want to actually know you, my cousin, my family." He smiled hesitantly. "If you're willing." I was willing. Cautiously, carefully, but willing. Because that was the thing about burning down the old structure. It created space for something new to grow. The call came on a Tuesday evening, 6 months and 3 days after Thomas's birthday party. I was in the kitchen, attempting to convince Oliver that broccoli was actually tiny trees that give you superpowers, while Emma watched the negotiation with the skeptical amusement of a child who knew exactly what vegetables were and wasn't buying any metaphors. "If they're tiny trees," Oliver said, eyeing the broccoli with deep suspicion, "why don't they have tiny birds?" "The tiny birds flew south for the winter. But it's summer." "Then they flew north, for summer vacation. Even tiny birds need vacation, Oliver." Emma snorted. "Mommy, that doesn't make sense." "Nothing about parenting makes sense. Eat your broccoli." My phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail. I'd learned to be careful about unknown numbers since reporters and curious acquaintances had somehow gotten hold of my contact information after the party. But something made me answer. "Hello?" A long pause. Then, "Rachel." My sister's voice, but different. Smaller, stripped of the polish and performance that had always defined her, like someone had sanded away all the sharp edges, leaving only raw wood underneath. "Rachel, please don't hang up." I set down the fork I'd been using to demonstrate proper broccoli eating technique, stepped out of the kitchen, away from little ears, into the living room where the evening light slanted through the windows. "I'm listening." Another pause. I could hear her breathing, shaky, uneven, the sound of someone gathering courage. "I've been trying to figure out what to say for months. I've written probably 50 messages that I never sent. Called your number 100 times and hung up before it could ring." A shaky exhale. "I'm not calling to ask for money. Or forgiveness. I need to say some things, even if you don't want to hear them." "Okay. I'm sorry." 2 words. Simple, direct. But they landed like stones in water, sending ripples through 34 years of shared history. "I'm sorry for the text message," Victoria continued. "For the emoji. For every time I made you feel small or stupid or worthless. For taking your money without knowing." Her voice cracked. "For taking your money. Period. Whether I knew where it came from or not." I sank onto the arm of the couch, my heart beating faster than it should. "Victoria." "Please, let me finish. I've been rehearsing this for weeks, and if I stop, I won't be able to start again." I stayed silent. "I've been in therapy," she said. "Court-ordered at first. After the party, after everything fell apart, I made some bad choices, drinking too much, pushing away the few friends I had left, having a breakdown in the middle of the department store that got me put on medical leave." A bitter laugh. "I was a mess, a complete disaster. And I kept telling myself it wasn't my fault, that you'd ruined my life, that Grandpa had humiliated me unfairly, that I was the victim. And now? Now I've spent 6 months with a therapist who doesn't accept my bullshit, Who made me look at things I'd spent my whole life avoiding? Victoria's voice steadied slightly, like she was reading from a script she'd memorized. I spent my whole life being Mom's favorite, and I thought that made me special. Better, more deserving. But all it did was make me cruel. Cruel how? Cruel in ways I didn't even see. Every time I mentioned my success, knowing you'd hear about it from Mom. Every time I took credit for things you helped me with. Every time I saw you struggling and told myself you deserved it because you weren't good enough to succeed the way I did. She was crying now. I could hear it in her voice. I learned that love was a competition, and I won by making sure you lost. Every time Mom compared us, every time Dad overlooked you, every time I got praised while you got ignored, I told myself I deserved it, that I was just better, that you were the problem. But I wasn't the problem. No, God no, you were never the problem. Victoria's voice broke completely. You were the solution. You were the one holding everything together while I took credit for the stability you created. I was the parasite, Rachel. I told myself I was the prize, but I was the parasite, and you were the host I was feeding on. I closed my eyes, let her words wash over me, the confession I'd never expected to hear, the acknowledgement I'd stopped hoping for. When James played those recordings at the party, Victoria continued, and I heard myself saying those things about you, cash cow, pathetic, desperate, I wanted to die. I wanted to literally disappear into the floor. Because I heard it from the outside for the first time, and I realized how monstrous it sounded, how monstrous I was. You were, I said quietly. Monstrous. I know. She didn't argue, didn't defend herself, just accepted it. And the worst part is, I don't even remember saying most of it. It was just how I talked about you. Normal, casual. Like you weren't even a real person with feelings. Just a resource to be used and mocked and discarded. Why are you telling me this now? Because I needed you to know that I see it. Finally. For the first time in my life, I see what I was, what I did, what I lost. A long pause. I lost my sister. I had a sister, and I threw her away for the privilege of being Mom's favorite. I chose their approval over your humanity, and I have to live with that for the rest of my life. I didn't respond. Didn't know how to respond. This was territory I'd never expected to navigate. Victoria, vulnerable. Victoria, taking responsibility. Victoria, seeing clearly. I don't expect anything from you, she said into the silence. I know I don't deserve another chance. I know you'd be completely justified in hanging up right now and never speaking to me again, but I couldn't keep living without at least trying to apologize. Even if you never want to hear from me again. I needed to say it. I needed you to know. I thought about Emma and Oliver in the kitchen, probably sneaking their broccoli into napkins while I was distracted. About David, who'd texted earlier to ask if I wanted company tonight. About the life I was building without the weight of family expectation. I thought about all the years I'd spent hoping Victoria would see me, really see me, and how hollow that hope felt now that it was finally happening. I'm not ready to forgive you, I said quietly. I don't know if I ever will be. I understand, but I hear you. I hear what you're saying, and I paused, searching for the right words. I hope you figure it out, Victoria. How to be a person. A real person, not a performance. Not Mom's daughter or the fashion designer or the golden child. Just a person who treats other people like they matter. I'm trying. It's hard. Turns out I have no idea who I am without all the labels I built my identity around. That makes two of us. A surprised laugh from Victoria's end, wet with tears but genuine. I guess we have more in common than I thought. Maybe. Silence stretched between us. Not comfortable, not hostile, just present. Two sisters on a phone line, 34 years of damage between them, trying to figure out what came next. I should go, Victoria finally said. The kids probably need you, and I've said what I needed to say. Victoria? Yes. Don't call again. Not unless you're really ready. Not unless you've done the work. For real. Not just to make yourself feel better. If you're serious about changing, actually changing, then someday maybe we can talk again. But I'm not waiting anymore. I spent my whole life waiting for this family to show up. I'm done waiting. I understand. And Victoria? Yes? Good luck, sincerely. I hope you find what you're looking for. I hung up, stood there for a long moment, phone in hand, waiting for something. Tears, maybe. Or anger. Or relief. What came instead was quieter than any of those. A kind of settling, like a door closing softly, not slammed in anger, not left ajar with hope, just closed, finished, final. I went back to the kitchen. "Who was that, Mommy?" Emma asked. "Just someone I used to know." "Are they nice?" I thought about it. "They're trying to be." "That's good." Emma nodded seriously. "Trying is important. You always say so." "I do say so, don't I?" I smiled, feeling something loosen in my chest. "Now, who's ready to eat their tiny trees?" Oliver made a face. But he picked up his fork. Life went on. Thomas died on a Thursday in October, 11 months after his 78th birthday party. He'd outlived every prediction the doctors had made. 6 months, they'd said. Maybe 12 with aggressive treatment. He'd made it 14 through sheer stubbornness and what he called unfinished business. I was with him at the end. Eleanor had called me at 3 a.m., her voice calm but tight. "It's time," she said. "He's asking for you." I drove through the darkness to his estate, the same roads I'd traveled almost a year ago for a party that had changed everything. The house looked different at night, smaller somehow, quieter, like it was already mourning its owner. Thomas was in his bedroom, propped up on pillows, surrounded by machines that tracked the slow failure of his body. But his eyes were clear when I walked in, sharp and blue and stubborn as ever. "Rachel." His voice was a whisper, but it carried. "You came." "Of course I came." "Nay." I sat in the chair Eleanor had placed beside his bed, took his hand, thin now, fragile, the hands of a man who'd sentenced criminals and raised children and held his wife as she died. "I wanted to wait," he said. "Wanted to see how things turned out." "How what turned out?" "You." A ghost of a smile. "I wanted to see you become yourself, the person you always could have been, without them weighing you down." Tears burned my eyes. "Grandpa!" "I see it, even now. You're standing straighter, speaking clearer, taking up space instead of shrinking into corners." He squeezed my hand with surprising strength. "Margaret would be so proud. I'm so proud." "I wish I'd had more time with you." "We have now. This moment. That's all any of us ever have." He turned his head to look at me fully. "I need to tell you something, while I still can." "Anything." "I'm sorry." The words came out heavy, weighted with decades. "I'm sorry I didn't intervene sooner. I'm sorry I let Helen build walls between us. I'm sorry I didn't fight harder for you when you were young and needed someone in your corner. You fought for me at the party. I should have fought for you every day. From the beginning. I saw how Helen treated you differently, and I told myself it wasn't my place. That parents had the right to raise their children as they saw fit. That you would be fine because you were strong." He closed his eyes. "Strength isn't a free pass for suffering, Rachel. I should have known that. You know it now. Too late. Not too late." I lifted his hand to my cheek, feeling the papery skin against my face. "You gave me permission. To be angry. To demand better. To stop carrying weight that was never mine. That wasn't too late. That was exactly on time." Thomas's eyes opened again, bright with unshed tears. "The will," he said. "It's all in order. Most of my estate goes to you and the children. Helen gets enough to cover her care. I won't let her suffer because of what she is, but the rest is yours." "I don't want to talk about money right now." "I know, but I need to say it. Need to know you'll be taken care of." He gripped my hand tighter. "Promise me something." "What?" "Promise me you'll spend it on yourself. On things that make you happy. On experiences and comfort and joy. Don't give it away to people who don't deserve it. Don't sacrifice it for others who would never do the same for you. Use it to build the life you deserve. I promise. And Rachel?" His voice was fading now, exhaustion pulling him under. "Teach your children what I wish I'd taught your mother. That love isn't earned, it isn't purchased, it isn't given only to the ones who perform best or demand loudest. Love is given freely, or it isn't love at all. I'll teach them." "Good." He closed his eyes. "Good." Eleanor stepped into the room, her face wet with tears. "Daddy?" "Eleanor." And Thomas smiled without opening his eyes. "My girls. Both my girls." We sat with him through the night. Eleanor on one side, me on the other, holding his hands as his breathing slowed. The machines beeped their quiet warnings. The darkness outside the windows gradually softened toward dawn. He died just as the first light touched the horizon. One moment breathing, the next simply still. The machines flatlined. The silence that followed was immense. "He waited," Eleanor whispered. "He waited to see the sun rise." I didn't respond. Couldn't. I just sat there, holding my grandfather's hand, watching the light spread across the walls of the room where he'd lived and loved and finally let go. The weight I'd carried for 34 years was nothing compared to the weight of that moment. But it was a different kind of weight. The weight of love, not obligation. The weight of grief, not guilt. The weight of someone who had seen me, truly seen me, and thought I was worth fighting for. The funeral was on a Monday under gray October skies that couldn't decide whether to rain. I hadn't known what to expect. Thomas had been estranged from half the family after the birthday party revelation. I'd assumed attendance would be sparse. Instead, the church was packed. Standing room only. People I recognized and people I didn't, all coming to pay respects to a man who had shaped their lives in ways large and small. The eulogies were long and varied. Former colleagues spoke of his judicial wisdom. Old friends recalled his dry humor and sharp mind. Eleanor delivered a tribute that made everyone cry, a daughter's love letter to a father who'd been imperfect but always present. I hadn't planned to speak, hadn't wanted to. What could I say that would capture who Thomas had been to me? A grandfather I'd barely known until the last year of his life. A stranger who became family. A judge who delivered the verdict I'd been afraid to request. But when Eleanor finished and the minister asked if anyone else wanted to share, I found myself standing, walking to the podium, looking out at a sea of faces, some sympathetic, some curious, some still uncertain how to feel about me after everything that had happened. "Thomas Whitfield was my grandfather," I said. "But I didn't really know him until 13 months ago. My mother made sure of that." A murmur through the crowd. I saw Helen in the front row, smaller than I remembered, leaning on Richard, her eyes confused and distant. The dementia had progressed. She probably didn't fully understand where she was or why. "I'm not saying that to be cruel," I continued. "I'm saying it because it's true. And Thomas believed in truth. He spent 40 years on the bench, sorting lies from facts, and he never stopped believing that the truth mattered, even when it was ugly, even when it hurt." I gripped the edge of the podium, steadying myself. "Last year, Thomas learned some truths about our family that disturbed him. He could have stayed quiet. He was dying. He knew he was dying, and he could have let things remain as they were. Let the comfortable lies continue. Let me keep carrying a weight that was never mine to bear." But that wasn't who he was. He believed that truth was more important than comfort. That love meant seeing clearly, even when clarity was painful. That family, real family, didn't hide from hard conversations. I looked at Eleanor, who was nodding through tears. "He gave me permission to be angry, to demand better, to stop disappearing for people who never bothered to see me. And in his last months, he showed me what family could be. Not perfect, not easy, but present, honest, real." My voice cracked on the last word. I took a breath. I didn't have enough time with him. None of us did. But I'm grateful for the time I had. I'm grateful he saw me clearly and loved me anyway. I'm grateful he taught me that I was worth fighting for. I looked down at my notes I'd prepared but barely glanced at. Thomas used to say that facts speak for themselves. So here are the facts. He was brave. He was principled. He loved fiercely even when love was complicated. He made mistakes and owned them. He died knowing he had tried to make things right. And the most important fact of all, he made me believe that I mattered, not for what I could give, but for who I was. That's a gift I'll carry for the rest of my life. I stepped back from the podium. The church was silent for a long moment. Then Eleanor began to clap, and others joined, and suddenly the whole room was applauding, not for me, but for him, for the man who had seen the truth and refused to look away. 3 weeks after the funeral, I brought Emma and Oliver to the cemetery. They were 4 now, old enough to understand that Great-Grandpa Thomas had gone to heaven, or wherever we decided to tell them he'd gone, young enough to be more interested in the squirrels running through the grounds than the weight of mortality. "Why are the stones so big?" Oliver asked, running his hand over a nearby marble monument. "So people remember. The stones tell you who's buried here and when they lived. Will we have big stones someday?" "Someday, but not for a very, very long time." Thomas's grave was simpler than many around it. Just his name, his dates, and an inscription he'd chosen himself. Thomas Whitfield, 1946 to 2027. The truth matters. So do you. I stood there for a long moment, the children on either side of me, feeling the autumn wind cut through my jacket. "Mommy!" Emma tugged at my hand. "Are you sad?" "A little. Great-Grandpa Thomas was very special to me." "Why?" How to explain it to a 4-year-old? The complicated history, the confrontation, the way Thomas had given me permission to be myself? "Because he saw me," I finally said. Sometimes people look at you, but they don't really see you. They see what they want to see or what they expect to see. But Great-Grandpa Thomas looked at me and saw who I really was. And he thought I was wonderful, just the way I was. Emma nodded seriously. "Like how you see me and Oliver." "Exactly like that. That's what mommies are supposed to do," she said matter-of-factly. "See their kids and think they're wonderful." Out of the mouths of babes. "You're right," I said, blinking back tears. "That's exactly what mommies are supposed to do." I knelt down to place flowers on the grave, white roses, his favorite. The petals were already wilting in the cold, but they still carried a faint, sweet fragrance. "Thank you," I whispered, too quiet for the children to hear. "For seeing me, for fighting for me, for giving me permission to fight for myself." The wind rustled through the trees. Somewhere nearby, a bird called out, was answered. "I don't know what happens next, with Mom and Dad, with Victoria, with everything you set in motion. But I know this. I'm going to be okay. The kids are going to be okay. We're building something real, something true. And that's because of you." I pressed my hand against the cold stone. "I love you, Grandpa. I wish I'd had more time to say it." The grave didn't answer, but somehow I felt heard anyway. 1 year after the accident, I stood in my kitchen on a Sunday morning watching the light stream through the windows I'd chosen myself. Emma was at the table drawing pictures of tiny trees that looked nothing like broccoli. Oliver was in the backyard digging for worms with the intensity of an archaeologist uncovering ancient relics. David was making pancakes, badly but with enthusiasm, while Maggie supervised and pretended not to notice he was burning them. This was my life now. This chaos, this warmth, this imperfect, beautiful noise. It wasn't the life I'd imagined when I was younger. I'd imagined a family that gathered for holidays, parents who called just to chat, a sister who was also a friend. I'd imagined belonging somewhere, to someone, without having to earn it. I'd never gotten that. I never would, but I'd gotten something else, something I hadn't known to wish for. I'd gotten truth. For anyone who's reading this, anyone who's carrying a weight that was never yours to bear, I want to share what I learned. For 34 years, I believed that love was something you could earn, that if I just gave enough, sacrificed enough, asked for nothing in return, eventually the people who were supposed to love me would see my value. I was wrong. Love isn't a transaction. It's not a reward for being useful. And no amount of money, time, or energy can buy something that should have been freely given from the start, the family I have now. Thomas, who saw me clearly at the end. Eleanor, who never stopped fighting for me. Maggie, who appeared when I needed her most. David, who is teaching me that partnership doesn't mean disappearing. My children, who love me simply because I'm their mom. They didn't love me because of what I could provide. They loved me because of who I am. That's the difference. And it took almost dying on an operating table to understand it. If you're reading this and you recognize yourself, if you're the reliable one, the strong one, the one who never asks for anything, I want you to know something. It's okay to put down the weight. It's okay to choose yourself. You're not selfish. You're not ungrateful. You're not a burden. You're finally free. And that freedom, it's the most terrifying, exhilarating, beautiful thing I've ever experienced. I hope you find yours. I finished writing and closed my laptop. In the kitchen, David had given up on pancakes and was ordering delivery instead. Emma was showing Oliver her drawings, narrating the story behind each one. Maggie was making tea and pretending not to cry at something Oliver had said. This was my family now, chosen, not assigned, earned through love, not obligation. I'd spent 34 years carrying weight that was never mine. Now, finally, I was learning to stand on my own. And the view from here? It was worth everything.